Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, this is Robert Smigel, and welcome to the BC edition of Canada's podcast, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in British Columbia. Today's guest is Brittany Noble. She is a songwriter, music publisher, and head of creative who was born and raised in beautiful Vancouver, Canada. After attending Berklee College of Music and living in LA for 2 years, Brittany used her ambition and entrepreneurial drive to launch her dream company, Be Noble Music Publishing, in January 2021 to advocate for and be a champion to Canadian songwriters. Well, Brittany, welcome to Canada's podcast. Thanks for taking the time today to be here for all our listeners.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have a songwriter. We don't get a lot of these. This is great. I think it's, being on the creative side, I'm really happy to have you here today and supporting Canadian songwriters. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. We know you're from Vancouver. You've done some traveling, but give us a little bit more of the details on your current business and how you make money at it and some of the things that kind of comprise, the company and what it stands for and some of the clients you have maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Be Noble Publishing has really been a long time coming. So I officially launched it in January 2021. But really the idea for the company came while I was still living in LA. I was finishing up a second degree in songwriting and music business down there. So that was really where I but really dove into music publishing and, really learned about how a songwriter can monetize their art. Growing up as a songwriter, started writing songs when I was like 13, 14 years old. I would write songs and I might, perform at a cafe or, a local nightclub or whatever that was. And that was kind of it. I didn't really know the world of songwriting beyond that. So it really wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles, I interned at a music publishing company in Sync House and really found out about the world of publishing and about sync for media and film and TV. And it really got me thinking about Vancouver and how much incredible talent is in Vancouver. But there just doesn't seem to be a lot of people in Vancouver either move away or they move to Nashville or Toronto or, LA and some of these bigger music cities. And I really wanted to bring back to Vancouver the knowledge and experience that I had learned and, experienced while I was in LA. So that really was kind of my motivation. I really fell in love with music publishing, met some incredible people while I was in LA. And I wanted to, bring that back to Vancouver and help as many songwriters as I could. And, not only create a music publishing company, but also just have that open door policy for songwriters, even if they're not at a stage in their career where they're wanting to be published, but that they could have someone in the industry that, has some knowledge and experience in the world of publishing and, as a songwriter to ask these questions to reach out to figure out how to make a living doing what they love.
Speaking of how to make a living, how do you make a living? Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that. I think it's how do you monetize? How do you bring dollars in the door?
Yeah, so it really sort of depends on your goals as a songwriter. There are a few different ways. So sync for film and TV is really huge. So that sync for film and TV is really, working with music supervisors and, showcasing either if you're signed with a publisher, then that would be the publisher's role would be to showcase your catalog, to showcase your songs, to look up the music supervisor and what they're working on and and showcasing that talent in those songs to be basically of use to them in their media, whatever they're working on. Another way, is performance royalties, performing around town or, tour, obviously because of COVID, tours and performing live hasn't really, been a huge part of the industry as of the last year. But, there's a lot of opportunities. One of the performance rights organizations, SOCAN, over the pandemic started, paying songwriters performance royalties for playing, over Zoom or Facebook Live or, whatever that is, because before you wouldn't get paid royalties for that. Another way is, co-writing, writing with other artists, writing with other writers. Those are kind of, or selling merchandise, that's really the record label side of things. But really for like songs and compositions, it's really about performance, writing for other writers, writing for other artists, and, getting those syncs for film and TV and things like that.
Okay, good. I want you to give me a key piece of knowledge or information about your industry that our
Yeah.
listeners can learn from that they may not know about. Now, given the fact that not many people may know about music publishing or
Yeah.
songwriting, maybe kind of give us some key general knowledge about your industry that we can learn from.
Yeah. I mean, I think sort of the biggest thing is that, songs that you might hear on the radio, sometimes the artist is writing those songs, but a lot of the times those songs that you hear on the radio aren't written by who's singing them and performing them. So I think songwriters sometimes get forgotten in a lot of things, and, they kind of, are kind of left behind in a lot of things, because the artist is, what people think about, and they think of these big pop stars and, those big names, but there's a lot of really talented people behind the scenes that are creating this music and this art that people are consuming that, people don't even think about. And, oftentimes too, they're kind of, they're not being paid fairly, or, they might get left out on credits, or, the royalty rates will be less than an artist royalty rate or things like that. So, that's kind of the job of a music publisher, is to really champion and, fight for songwriter rights and advocate for things like increasing royalty rates and making sure that your writers are being properly compensated for, and things like that. So a songwriter is basically, what makes music happen. Without a songwriter, you wouldn't have songs and music. So, songwriters get left behind a lot. And so that was really sort of the main focus that I wanted to focus on, was really championing and advocating and making sure that songwriters are being paid fairly.
Yeah, what's interesting I've learned about the recording business is that a lot of the times they bring in session musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So just the band you see may not be actually playing on the album. They're,
Exactly.
they're
Mm-hmm.
musicians that come in, play the stuff, and they're more, even though it may be their songs, but it's
Yeah.
up to the producer at that point that does that. Is that who makes that decision?
I would say it varies case by case. Sometimes, like if it's if it's a big artist signed to a record label, then usually it's the record label calling the
Yeah.
shots. So it really depends on, the situation. As an independent artist, or they just hiring someone to, record it in the studio and then they want to play it for themselves, play it by themselves live, or there's so many different varying situations that, that can
Yeah.
happen.
Okay, what's the long-term vision and what will your company look like in the future? Do you see the company expanding into other areas, and where beyond Vancouver, BC, or
Yeah.
even Canada? So this could be like, I guess you could really, you're talking about songs here, but you could technically do movie scores. You could probably do commercials and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting you say that. Actually, one of my writers is actually interested in potentially going into film scoring. And that's a little bit different than songwriting, where film scoring is you get the media or whatever it is, the scene from the TV show or movie, and you actually create the music to, a lot of the times, to write alongside that media. So that's a little bit different from songwriting. But so I'm actually helping him create a bit of a demo, to get into scoring for film and TV. But that isn't really the focus. My focus is really just to help as many songwriters as I can. I would love to grow the company. One of my challenges is just being a one-woman show right now. It can be a little challenging, getting back to people as I, in a timely fashion, as I want to maintain that open door policy. And I've got other writers reaching out to me, and then I've got PR and people that are helping me write grants. And, my current writers that I have signed to my roster, there's a lot of moving parts, can be challenging. So definitely want to grow the company in that sense. And then I would also love to open up eventually in, 2 or 3 years, an LA office, really help to bridge the gap between cities like LA and Vancouver. And, there's so many independent music publishing companies and sync houses in LA. And I would love to sort of bring that mindset to Vancouver and help bridge those gaps a little bit too.
Okay, great. I love how you segued into Vancouver, because that's what we want to talk about now, doing business in Vancouver and what that looks like for you. What are the biggest benefits for you in being an entrepreneur here in Vancouver, British Columbia? I want you to give us some of the good points about starting a company here, but I also want you to give us some of the tough things or challenges for our listeners so they can keep an eye out for them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of my biggest challenges was probably launching a company in the middle of a pandemic, where the future was kind of uncertain. People weren't really sure what was happening, and I think at that point, you just have to trust your gut. You just have to trust your intuition. You have to go for it. And sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith and jump off that cliff and see where it lands. And I think one of the most amazing parts is not only the talent that we have here, but there's a lot of actually like government funding and things like that that can help entrepreneurs. And especially in the entertainment sector, we just got past, a bunch of us creatives were lobbying for this fund called Amplify BC that has just been passed, and that's been a multi-million-dollar fund that will be going into the entertainment industry to help entrepreneurs, to help artists. So I would say that government funding and support is really great. And I don't know if you see that in any other, part of the world. The support and the funding that we have from the government is really great.
Challenges?
Challenges for me, basically what I said, launching a company, in the middle of a pandemic, and, also navigating being a creative and starting a business. I didn't go to business school, and so I really do have that creative mindset, but I also do have that entrepreneurial mindset. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. I've got a ton of family friends that have been very successful entrepreneurs. So I've had a really great support system to kind of help me and coach me through this process. And it's been really fun. It's been really cool as a creative venturing into launching my own business. And, I've learned a lot. And I think, one of the challenges, has been that I don't have a ton of business experience. But I think as a creative and as a musician, you have to have that entrepreneurial mindset, whether or not you're an independent artist or not. I think, your art and is your product. That is what you're selling. Yeah. And so whether creatives like it or not, they are absolutely, business people. And, there's kind of that thing in the creative world, sell out, or they're doing this to sell out. But, at the end of the day, we also have bills to pay, and, we have mouths to feed and a roof to put over our heads. So I think kind of adjusting, a creative mindset to think about numbers has been a bit of a challenge for me as well. And actually something I've talked a lot about with my lawyer when we were constructing my agreements is initially I came into it wanting to be, this really, really artist friendly thing, but I wasn't thinking about forward growth as a company. And so we kind of, skewed my agreements a little bit to definitely still be very artist friendly, where the artist is definitely coming first, but it's also taking into account forward growth as a company, where that wasn't something that I even really thought of first when I, set out to do this. So I think, surrounding yourself with people who know more than you about certain areas is also really important to do when you're launching a business that you might not have a ton of experience doing.
Do you think entrepreneurs are are weird or unique in a positive way, or are wired differently. To go out there and start your own business, especially with you on the creative side,
Mhm.
it really takes a lot of a lot of guts to kind of do what you're doing. And like you said, the pandemic and everything going on. But overall, do you think
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, big risk takers, look at the world differently? Do you think that that's the
I
case?
think I think you have to be, honestly. I think, a lot of entrepreneurs are glass half full mentality. You have to go into a situation where you're launching or you're putting something out in the world, and there are a billion reasons why it could fail, right? But if we're constantly thinking about the why it can fail, we're never going to move forward. So I think we are, wired differently in just that sense alone. And, of course, you have to be grounded and level headed. And, we shouldn't be jumping off, a billion cliffs at a time. But, sometimes you do have to take a leap of faith. And, not every person is willing to do that. And, there are a lot of hours and there are a lot of struggles and there's a lot of learning that goes into running a business and launching a business. And I don't think everyone is cut out for that. So,
Right. So, how do you educate yourself? What books are you reading now and why, or even audiobooks or podcasts? And can you
yeah.
recommend any books for our listeners who are also entrepreneurs?
Mhm. So I've been reading a lot of books sort of geared towards music publishing. So the Plain and Simple Guide to Music Publishing, all you need to know about the music business, and then because a lot of my clients, a lot of my writers' goals are to be in film and TV. So reading books that are geared towards music supervision. So a book called Thinking in Sync, a primer on the mind of a music supervisor. Also, just educating myself on the latest, what's happening in the music business, like music business worldwide. I also read a lot of like self-help books, like The Power of Now, listen to a lot of podcasts, And the Writer Is with Ross Boland, Broken Record with Rick Rubin, a lot of podcasts that are really just centered around the music business. Because I do feel like you do have to be an expert in your field if you are going to launch something and you are going to do something. You have to be an expert in your field and at least know a lot about, what you're doing. So I really do try and listen to as many podcasts as I can, read as many books as I can, read as many music blogs, all of that.
So, technology wise, which is really interesting because music has changed over the years. You always hear that, there's the typical band guys that are great musicians, great drummers, great guitar players, great singers, keyboard players. But then you got these guys that are in their bedrooms with a computer and everything's synthesized or computer generated and Pro Tools and all these different things.
Mhm.
Has that divided the industry at all? Or do people still want to hear music, or are they just interested in the computers where everything's done on a laptop?
I wouldn't say that it's divided the industry. I think the industry is constantly changing. Like something that was the way it was yesterday might be totally different tomorrow. So I think it's just growing and evolving with the times. I think there was a little bit of like, especially when the rise of EDM, electronic dance music came up, and the bedroom producer, and there was a bit of like, um, that's not real music or whatever. But I think that opinion is slowly changing, and people are seeing the benefits of, being able to record things, in a bedroom or wherever. It makes things very efficient. You can, share files back and forth very easily. You can save, cost on, not having to book a recording studio, things like that. So I think, the whole mind frame around that is definitely changing. And I think it depends on the type of music that you're into as well. I think there's
Yeah.
always going to be space for a live band and live
Yeah.
music. And that's not going away. So I think it's almost just, meshing the new with the old and moving forward.
Yeah, last weekend I was in a recording studio with a bass player, really good bass player, 18 years old, and he loves the old music. He likes the Rush, Black Sabbath. And I was
Mhm.
like, shouldn't you be listening to like, all the latest stuff? He goes, yeah, I do, but this is the stuff I
Yeah,
like to play. I was really
totally.
stunned. He was 18, and I was
Mhm.
like, wow, you really like the old stuff, eh? You know,
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin. Oh yeah. And he knew it too. And he knew how to
Mm.
play it, which is really
Yeah,
interesting.
for sure.
Okay. Okay. If you weren't doing what you do now, what would you like to do for a profession?
Oh, gosh, I've asked myself this before, and honestly, I I know it's cheesy to say, but I was born to be in the music industry in whatever capacity. So if I wasn't doing music publishing, then I would be writing. Well, I still am writing songs, but I would, that would be my main focus, would be writing songs, performing, just being involved with creatives and being creative and singing and creating. That's just what I have to do in my life. So if I wasn't doing music publishing, I would definitely still be doing something on the creative aspect.
You couldn't be an accountant, could you?
Could not be an accountant. No, I
No.
could
Okay.
not.
In business, what is your favorite word, quote, or sentence that you like to use frequently? Is there anything that you use often? If people were to say, she uses that a lot, that sentence, that quote.
Hmm. I would probably say, especially lately, I've been saying be very clear on your why. And the reason why I've been saying that is because I think, especially in the entertainment industry, there is, a lifestyle that's associated with it as well. It's, COVID, it's definitely slowed down, but there's the networking aspect of things and, going out and seeing live shows. And sometimes you can kind of get lost in it and you can forget why you started writing songs in the first place, or, why you wanted to work at a label or publishing company or whatever it is. And I think being concrete on your why and holding true to that. And of course, there's balance. You need to let loose and have fun and meet people, but staying clear to your why is only going to help keep you focused and motivated and moving forward.
Do you have any advice that you may have received from someone else that you can pass on to entrepreneurs throughout Canada?
Yeah. So, a close family friend of mine is a very successful entrepreneur in Vancouver, and we were having a chat over the phone right when I launched. And, I was just kind of asking him if he had any tidbits of advice. And he was saying that he meets with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people like asking for funding or things like that. And they come with this big, presentation on their brand and their company and what they do. And then they never touch on how their brand or their product is going to make his life easier. So, they do this whole presentation and then he's sitting there and he's going, like, that sounds great. It sounds like a great product, sounds like a great innovation or an idea. But how does that make my life better? Like, why should I invest in your product, or why should I, buy your product or whatever it is? And so that really helped shape, the way that I am running my business, where I'm not only thinking about my product, which are songs and, my songwriters, but I'm also thinking about the music consumer and the music supervisor and the people that are potentially buying my product, and how my business model will make their life better, how I can make it easier for a music supervisor to clear a song, to do their job. So it's not just about my brand, my company, and the product that I am supplying. It's also about who the customer is, how what I'm doing is making their life easier, and why they should essentially at the end of the day buy my product.
Okay, awesome words of advice. Okay, Brittany, we're going to wrap things up. How can our listeners get a hold of you? And is there anything you'd like to add before you leave us today?
Yeah. You can definitely visit my website at www.bnoblemusicpublishing and reach out to me. My email is on the website, but it's brittany@bnoblemusicpublishing.com. And the last piece of advice is, if there is something that you are wanting to do, go and do it. I think the last year and a half has taught us all that anything is possible. The craziest things can happen in life that we will never expect. And I think to flip that on the positive, to watch out for, those things that are eating at you and that are just you're wanting to do, but you're scared of, or you're thinking of all the ways why it'll fail or why it won't work. And sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith and jump off that cliff and see where it lands.
Gain your wings on the way down.
Exactly.
There you go. Well said. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I've learned a lot about you, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. And to all our listeners, thanks for listening today, our Canada's podcast, and listening to Brittany's story. Like, comment, and to subscribe to all our channels to get the latest podcasts from entrepreneurs across Canada. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.